Well, I think everyone hopefully is joining on. We might have some join us in a bit, but for the attendees, we wanted to get welcomed with some introductions. Thank you to everyone that is attending. We are recording this webinar for those that may want to view it later. I am Krystal Bronson. I am a 2010 graduate from the University of Dayton. I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and serve as the UD's Alumni Association community lead there. We have alumni organizations across the country, and so I kind of sit in the Louisville one. I'm happy to help that community there and keeping our engagement. I am an HR manager at BKD. It's a CPA and advisory firm. I had studied accounting and minored in communications and started my career as a tax accountant with BKD in Cincinnati, and then had the opportunity to relocate to Louisville to do recruiting for some years, and now sit in the HR space helping our team members with their development and engagement within their work at BKD. And so I have with me today Sharon Howard. She graduated in '78. She is the Director of Site Communication with Premier Health. So Sharon will be with us for the first 30 minutes of today's presentation. And then we also have Kevin Tarrant, who graduated in '79. He is a partner at Pierce Consulting Partners and an adjunct professor at the Daniels School of Business at the University of Denver. So with that, I'll let them kind of say hi and welcome themselves.
Hi, Flyers.
Hey, go Flyers.
Great, sound is working, so we're good there.
Yep.
Well, great to have you guys. I'm so glad this was able to work out so we could all come together to share a little bit of insight, with our fellow UDers about their personal brand. And we have quite a few questions that we'll go through and ask you guys as a panel together. And then please remember that while we can't be on campus, we still wanted to provide this digital environment with you to allow you to speak, to those of you on campus, as we are in Dayton, Louisville, and Denver right now. So coming to you from across the country. So this session might be the first time you have heard about developing a personal brand. And maybe you might be wondering, why is it important to you? So we'll dive into the topic, and remember that you can submit questions at any time through the Q&A function within the Zoom. So while we have some questions, please know that you can share those at any time. So first, we'll get started just wanting to talk about brands. So we all know about the success of certain brands. So when I say Nike or Apple or Google, things come to mind. So there's positive things about brands and then some negative impacts too that can happen. So, let's start with just talking about what is a personal brand and why is it important? Sharon, maybe we'll start with you. What is a personal brand to you and why is it important?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. When I think of personal brand, I do, like you, Krystal, look around and I think about how long the golden arches has been out there for McDonald's, and they never steer away from that logo. They might reface the building, they might add new products, but you know what the golden arches is. And so when you think about your personal brand, that is how you are perceived in the community, or your touch points in your work environment. How are you perceived? How are you presenting yourself to the broader space of a community? And so when I think about developing a personal brand, it's so critical, because you don't always think about that when you're starting a career. You're trying to find a job, you're trying to get a paycheck, you're trying to pay off student loans. Those are things that are critical and top of mind. And then once you get into your career, you start thinking about, how are people perceiving me? And if I am putting myself out there in a way that will help me continue to grow and develop as a leader.
Well, those are good points. And Kevin, do you have anything to add to that about, what is a personal brand for you and why is it important?
I will tell you, I think it's one of the most critical things you need to develop. It doesn't, you start in one place, but you keep refining that brand over your career. I come from a unique perspective. I've been in human resources for 40 years. I was chief HR officer. I've interviewed thousands of people, and people that resonate. I remember the ones who have a clear brand and can show why it's important, why it's a good fit for the company. On the other side is, it's helped me in my career. I wish I knew what I knew now. When I started out, it was something I had to figure out. And it took about 20 years to hone the brand. Once that happened, I got calls from companies that were looking for people like me with my kind of brand, but I knew how to refine it and talk about it. and relate it to what that company was looking for in both terms of the job responsibilities, the culture, the values, the systems. So to me, you got to know yourself before you can apply for a job. And one way you know yourself, you start out with, what is my brand?
Mhm.
Yes, that's a good point. And, before we delve into developing a personal brand, and Kevin, we can start with you with this one. Can you share any examples of individuals who have a strong personal brand and maybe what sets them apart?
Well, it's interesting. If I throw names at you, Sharon talked about companies like McDonald's and other companies. If I say names, Eli, I throw names out, guess what? I bet you have starting to have an image of that person. So, a brand is part of image and reputation. Let's use currently Trump. If I throw Trump out, some of you're going to have different images or reputations or a brand that you think he brings. Here's the issue is, I bet some of you have different brands of how you would define Trump. When you go into a company or a job, you will have a brand, whether you like it or not. Question for you is it the brand you want the company to have of you? Or is it something that is actually hurting you in your career? We will talk about you in companies and we will talk about your brand, but you better be able to define that brand the way you want it to be.
Absolutely.
Yes, very true. And Sharon, do you have any examples of individuals, with a strong personal brand and maybe share what sets them apart for you?
Well, I listened to Kevin's opening remarks, and he talked about how you evolve over time. The majority of my career was spent in television, so I was always seen. I was in front of the camera, so I had to learn about developing a personal brand pretty early. But if I were to think of somebody off the top of my head today, I look at someone like LeBron James. LeBron James started as this basketball phenom, and he spent many, many years developing that to be the best. And he did that. But I'm also thinking of LeBron James at probably near the end of his career and how he started laying that groundwork to what is life going to be like for LeBron James after basketball. So he moved into entertainment, but now he's in this whole piece about he started a school. So it's about educating young people. And now he's stepping out in terms in this whole social justice arena. So his brand is continuing and it's still bigger than life, but not just for basketball.
That's a great example to kind of tie in those aspects. And you kind of started to allude into maybe one of the next questions we wanted to talk about is like, how do you do it? Where do you focus? We talked about what a brand is and how it can set you apart, but Sharon, do you want to kind of give an overview for our attendees out there of, if they don't have a personal brand or if they're looking to refine theirs, how does an individual develop one's brand?
Well, first of all, I hope our students are really looking for mentors to help them, because we don't want them to think that this is something that they necessarily have to do all alone. But I remember when I started my career in television, there weren't any women in leadership. There weren't any Black women in leadership, Black people in general. And so I really didn't have that benchmark to look for in terms of what I could be like. But the one thing that I did know is that from the time I was little, I was never shy. And so I was never afraid to walk into a room. Stop nodding, Kevin. I know you know that. I was never scared to walk into a room and not know anybody, but I knew early on that the only person who was going to advocate for me was me. I knew I had the skills. I knew I had the education. I knew all of that resume stuff, great. But when it comes to developing your brand, you need something that a resume can't give you. So I just started going to everything someone invited me to. I started thinking, what is my passion? And I realized that my passion was service and community. So what do I need to do to develop that? So if I were to tell you today, my resume is really long, my bio is really long and obnoxiously long, which I like to say because I'm old. But the reality is that's not the most precious thing to me. The most defining thing for me today is my network. I have built a great network, and it's a network that really works. And that's built on developing my personal brand.
No, those are good points to kind of be aware of like really what goes into a brand. It's not just a tagline mission you have, a mission statement or something. It's other things that can factor into helping you support that brand that you've created or are trying to create.
And wanting to make sure that the people that you're interacting with, you have to, now you have to be able to defend it. You have to live it and breathe it, and make sure that your brand is one that it's solid and positive. But that's the only way that you can really develop that brand, is figure out that passion and then work to being the best in that arena.
Hmm. No, those are good points. And Kevin, do you have any key points or things that you'd want to share with individuals of, when you go to create your own individual personal brand, what key points do you feel like are really important to creating a successful brand?
Yeah, I think especially college students, I think probably a lot of you do not have job experience. So you might be saying to yourself, how do I create a brand at this point? Think of two words. What is your image? What is your reputation? All right. And how do you start to develop that? So a good starting point, even for college students, is ask any bosses you've had, and even summer jobs or whatever, teachers, friends, family, ask them to describe you. What is your image reputation? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your greatest assets? What do you know about me? You could start to build that story at this point, because that is part of your brand. The best way, I heard someone describe it, there's a book called Brand Pays by Karen Kang. She calls it about a cake and icing. Cake is more the rational value, your experiences, the kinds of things you've done. Functional expertise, more of your schools, your studies, and so forth. The second is the icing, which is the emotional part, more of your personality, your image. Those are the things that create a strong personal brand. If you start now with what your strengths and how others would describe you, as you get more job experiences, you'll get a little bit more cake. You could add more of that cake. But if you can come into me, if I'm interviewing you and I give you 1 minute, can you describe yourself and your brand in less than a minute? Many people cannot. I even do executive recruiting today. These are people with 30 years experience, still cannot define their brand. To be honest with you, when they can't define their brand, the rest is like, it doesn't mean anything to you, because they're all over the place. So to me, there's some very basics you could start right now, because you do have a brand. If I ask your friends to describe you, or your parents or your teachers, they all would have stuff to say.
I didn't know if you were about to reverse this panel and ask me that question. I was getting a little nervous. No, I mean, that's a good point. And I feel like how many interviewers, right, when you're going to apply for a job, probably ask the question, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, that is the same question. Get your brand ready, right? What are your taglines? What are you most passionate about? And really always thinking too about, like, you got to know yourself, but then also how do you tie that to the position you're applying for, right? Like what are those connecting pieces? Kind of tailoring it to talking about personal brands, in your careers or future careers. Kevin, would you like to elaborate a little bit on, like, how can a strong personal brand help with somebody's career?
Well, I'll just share my own personal experience for me. Here's my brand. I'm a global-minded, business-oriented HR executive that thrives as a change agent during organizational change, and while building a human capital strategy that's tied to the business. That's who I am. I built that over years. So when companies were looking for heads of HR that were going through a lot of change, global, it involved many countries. I had 3 international assignments where I lived overseas. They needed a business-oriented HR. Guess what? Companies started to call me, headhunters called me for that. If it also eliminated, one of the things I learned from one of my CEOs, he goes, Kevin, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And it's just important to know what you're saying no to. That's the same thing with brand. There's nothing wrong to go into an interview or come out and say, no, this is not the right job. It doesn't fit my passion, my drive, my brand. Once I refined that, it was amazing how I got that clarity, how many more jobs I got calls for. but it took a while to develop that. And again, like I said earlier, I wish I knew that the first 10 years of my career. I mean, because I moved 23 times in my career and I worked for various companies. I was a little bit all over the place for the first 10 to 15 years because I didn't have clarity, and I took jobs that did not work out for me. If I had a clarity, I knew I would have taken better jobs, better roles, better cultural fit if I really did know my personal brand better.
So it kind of pays to kind of do that, yeah, due diligence now and take that time to figure those things out, knowing it can change, but kind of take that time now to develop. Sharon, a question for you. Do you feel that people should adjust their personal brand based on a job they are applying for, maybe versus like genuine versus what you think the company is looking for?
That's a bit tricky. Let me start by saying, when you're looking for a job, you really need to investigate them as much as they're investigating you. So when you're looking for that job, you really need to do your research to see, is this the company that I want to work in? And not just what's on a website, but trying to dig deeper into figuring out what is that culture of the organization, so that when you're going in there, you are prepared to interview them as much as they're interviewing you. So let me say that first of all. Obviously, depending on the job, you do tend to tweak your presentation, so to speak, according to that job. But your passion stays your passion. And if you don't stay, if your passion is not foundational to who you are, you will end up jumping around and not really being happy because you're chasing money instead of chasing what your dream really is. And I know it's hard because when you're young, you chase money. And I chased money. You know, I was a single mom, a son who was in private school. I got to be able to pay for that. So all of those variables came into play when I made the decisions for the job. But I can honestly say, even though my jobs have changed, every job I've had, I've loved the work that I did. So I will tell you that every job that I had, there was never a job that I had that I can sit here and say I hated it. It fed my soul in some way, every job that I did. But you do make changes. And when you're talking about your brand, sometimes, as Kevin mentioned earlier, over time, you will find people looking for you based upon your reputation and your personal brand, as much as you're looking for them.
You know, building on what Sharon said here, I'm going to give you a secret. You want to become in the top 20% of all applicants for a job? If you know your personal brand and you can come in and show why you are, my personal brand's a good fit with this company because your strategy, where you're going, it's a good fit what my passion's about. Two, the culture, the values of this company is a good fit for me. This is why, because it links to my personal brand. And last is the job responsibilities fits my personal brand. If you can articulate your personal brand to I call it the 3 whys, why this company, why this, with this business strategy, values, and responsibilities, you will be in the top 20% of applicants. I tell you, I do not like, and this is a personal feeling, I've interviewed thousands of people. I can tell when someone's trying to sell themselves and trying to maneuver to fit the job.
Yep.
I always tell people, either you want to hit a bullseye, because as Sharon said, it's a mutual agreement between the company and you. I'd rather someone hit the bullseye and say, here's what I bring, this is what I'm good at, this is my brand. And if that's what you're looking for, I'm the right person. Versus, I feel people trying to hit the dartboard. Oh, you said that. They try to move it around. And you know what? Good interviews will catch that and you'll get knocked out.
Mm-hmm. And it goes the same way, right? Like if you go into an interview and you try to connect it and then you leave as a candidate, realizing that maybe your brand is not lining up, then that's okay. It's not a wasted interview. It's just that you were learning in that moment that maybe you need to move on to. So great ways to show how to be successful. Assuming, yeah, you're passionate about wanting that role. That's really good.
You put your passion out in the universe. I mean, Kevin could articulate what his passion is for the purpose of today's webinar and our students. I would say, you know, when you sign up to get on Twitter, they ask you to fill out this profile with so many characters that you have to put in who you are. that is a perfect place to start thinking about what are you putting out in the universe on Twitter. And so when I think about everything that I do, like I said on a resume, when I had to do my Twitter profile, I did like Kevin. I had to stop and say, okay, I've got a short amount of, I got a little window. What am I going to say about myself that's going to speak to me, but also push out to the universe? So that's a good starting point for the young people on today's webinar.
No, absolutely. So it's almost like Kevin's analogy earlier about the cake, like your resume is a cake. You got a lot of that stuff out there. People may know that, but make sure, don't forget the icing. Who wants to forget the icing? Got to
That's the
put that
best
in there.
part.
Exactly. Can't forget the icing. Awesome. Well, maybe one more question before we start to delve into a couple more of the Q&As that have come in. Question about, are there any pitfalls or mistakes that individuals should be aware of with personal brands? Kevin, maybe we'll start with you. Any pitfalls to be aware of?
Yeah, one, these are myths. Doing a great job equals a great reputation. You know, you think that, oh, I'm doing a great job, so my brand's out there and it's good. Guess what? Not people are not mind readers. You may have to promote yourself. You know, some people think about being boastful or going out there is wrong. Your boss is not going to take care of your career. Those days are gone. You have to take care of it, and you're going to have to go out there. And if you're being successful, talk about that and make sure you share with others or they see that. Okay. So just think it's going to take care of itself. It doesn't happen that way. So being self-promotion of what your strengths are, again, as Sharon said, your passions, I love people to keep sharing that. And guess what? It takes, as we say in communication, it takes it over and over again to get it to stick. One time's not enough. So don't be shy. Don't be bashful. I always tell like engineers, I worked with a lot of engineers. You can have a great idea as an engineer, but if you can't sell it, it's worthless. It doesn't get anywhere in a company, right? So you got to find a way to sell it, and you have to find a way to sell yourself.
I think Kevin gave you a really good feedback. I'm gonna take a slightly different look in terms of mistakes for young people. Social media. Social media can be a big mistake for you because we get caught up in the moment and we believe that we're behind this wall. But I can tell you, my HR team scrubs social media all the time, looking to see who you are. You might have sent me the best resume known to man, but I'm telling you, my team is scrubbing your social. So there's nothing more evident than through this election season, I've unfriended and blocked a ton of people because it's not something that I want to see or engage in. Social media can really get you in trouble. And I'll give you a great example that just happened. And Kevin probably saw this. Google Jeffrey Toobin. Yes. Jeffrey Toobin is a hugely successful legal analyst on CNN. He has the most incredible career. I mean, he is like the top. If you're looking for somebody to peel back the Constitution legally, he's your man. Okay, he's on a Zoom call. I don't know how this happened, but he's exposing himself on a Zoom call because he didn't think his camera was on or that he could be seen. Guess what? He's suspended from one job. He had to walk away from CNN. He will likely lose his job. In one fell swoop, gone, kaput, everything that he worked for. So I would just caution our students to really start now thinking, well, you're like, okay, I'm a student, I'm not in the work world yet. No. You need to start now making sure that your social media presence is one that is stellar. Not to say you can't have fun and do it, just be careful.
Sharon, that's a great point. I mean, I know Jeffrey too, and I was shocked. I had him in the highest regard.
Shocked.
As far now, it's lost. He's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side, to Sharon's point about social media, because all HR departments, we always check it. We're looking at it. You can actually build your brand. So if you're a leader, show me on social media you're a leader.
Bang.
Or, you know, whatever your brand is, you can actually positively enhance it in social media. So it could do the opposite of negative, or it could promote. So be very conscious of it. We're all looking at it, and we look for consistency. It's
Yep.
just like if I look at your LinkedIn profile, but your resumes tell me a different story, or if I go to somewhere else on Facebook or somewhere else, if I see these disconnects, I don't think you're being genuine or authentic. And so to me is, you got to look at this common thread. And again, if you understand your brand, think of it as a common thread that crosses all of these avenues that we look at when you're looking for a job.
No, those are great
I just want
examples.
everybody to know I love social media. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm all over social media, but I use my social media to really talk about community things. And I'm really mindful not to get pulled into the fray.
Right.
No, those are good points because it's something that a lot of us, if not all, are experiencing on social media in some regard. Some are more involved than others, but it's good to have an awareness of, what your brand are you putting out there. Absolutely. And you never know who it'll pick up or who might see it. So very
It's just
good
like
point.
doing volunteer work. If you're not working, if you're volunteering in certain areas, again, that shows me what you're passionate about. It shows me what your brand. There's so many ways you could promote it and put it out there versus saying, oh, I don't have a job, I can't do anything else. Not true. A lot of people have lost their jobs right now. Okay.
Absolutely.
Have I been getting unemployment for 6 months and done nothing versus someone who's trying to maybe go and getting more education and a passion they're about, maybe going at night or volunteering for this or sitting on little boards where they're giving back. All of a sudden your reputation, your brand's actually increasing during this time, not decreasing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Sharon, I know that you have to head out in a couple minutes. So maybe before you jump off, and we'll continue on because we have quite a few questions coming in so that Kevin and I will go through, but any final thoughts or advice or any tips in this challenging environment that you'd want to share with our student attendees?
I just want to leave them with a message of hope and aspiration, because I think you're right at the beginning of what you really are destined to be. And so the fact that you are, first of all, you're going to a great institution for your academics, but you also have an institution that is interested in building you up once you leave. So these webinars that UD is doing is such a great opportunity for you to soak in all those additional things that you may not get in a classroom. And then the last thing I would say is it doesn't matter. You could be bold, you could be shy, you could be any of those things and have a wonderful personal brand that you develop for yourself. But I will just leave by saying, figure out what brings you joy. What is it that brings you joy, and figure out a way to get paid for that. And you are batting 1,000, because that's what I had to do. I had to think about those things that brings me joy and then say, okay, but I still need to check. And once you do that, you're going to have a fabulous career.
Great thoughts. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sharon, for joining us.
Aaron,
Thank you. Good to see you, Kevin.
Hey, everyone, make sure you lose LinkedIn and network with Sharon. She's a great networker.
I believe in the power of the network, because when I need something, I need to be able to pick up the phone, call Kevin, and then basically tell him, I don't know what you're pausing for. Just give me what I asked for. That's when you've reached the pinnacle.
We all can strive to have that. Thank you, Sharon.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. Well, as we transition back to some of the other questions we have quite a bit. We want to get to those, Kevin. So one of them we wanted to talk about was kind of thinking back to your first networking experience. How was that for you? Was it stressful? Any general suggestions about networking, in this COVID environment?
Yeah, here's the thing. Networking, I call it, there's givers and there's takers. The takers are the ones that they're not giving to others. They take when they need. I'll tell you when it's not a good time to network: when you lose your job. If you haven't networked before that, it's very hard to network when you lost your job, when you haven't maintained your network, because now you become just a taker. And I did lose my job back in the dot-com blow up in the 2000, 2001 time frame. And I lost my network. I didn't stay my network. And it took me a lot longer to rebuild that network and to get going. And I learned a valuable lesson. networking is a lifetime skill. You start now and you keep growing your network because you never know when you need it. And as you get into your career, it even helps you when you're just graduating from college. But, and Krystal, you could probably answer this too on the HR side. When you start to get 5 to 10 years of experience, network is how you get jobs. To get to the C-suites or the top jobs, the only way you get is network. They go to headhunters like me, and I use my network to find the right people. So, you know, it's sometimes uncomfortable for people, but go back to activities you like. You know, my son likes archery. I tell him, okay, get involved in archery and build a network with other archers, but you never know where people come from. And by the way, in networking, a lot of times it's not the first degree, it's the second degree, right? You can actually, a lot of people, I talk about informational interviewing. So I have a lot of people that maybe lost their job or looking to make a change. What they do is they use a network. They might reach out to me and say, Kevin, do you know so-and-so at this company? And I say, yes. I said, why don't you reach out to them, let them know that I said that, but you invite them for a cup of coffee and say, listen, based on my personal brand, I think you're a company of interest to me. I like the strategy. I like the products you do. I like the value system. Can I take you to get a cup of coffee? I want to learn more about that company and see if that's a potential fit or something else. That person may afterwards say, you know, Krystal, you're not a good fit at our company, but I know someone at someone else's company that I think you would be a good person for. It's amazing how the antennas that go out and the connections for networking, how it works. It happens. We call it the Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation. I call it the Kevin Bacon 2-3 degree of separation. It's amazing how quickly those connections happen.
And especially with your flyer connections, I would say, I mean, for me too, in my personal experience, only being out, you know, just over 10 years now, it's incredible. Like maybe you don't have to stay in touch with every connection every month, right? You know, but just like having that connection on LinkedIn and setting reminders of who those key players are in your experiences that you want to have that connection with at some point. People that leave your company, you know, as an alumni, you want to stay in touch with all of those individuals because you never know when you can help an individual, right? Be a giver in an opportunity or be a taker at some points. You can be both, and that's okay. It's just not good to be one, as you mentioned. So,
okay, Krystal, I have, in my job, I have access to all 700 million people on LinkedIn. And I can search and do all this. And I searched UD, CEOs, COOs. You know, we have like 5,000 out there in different kinds of worlds. And my point is, the UD connection, if I get a resume and it has a UD grad, you go to the top of the list. I will give that more attention for my network because I think of UD and how much I care about the school. You go to the top of the list. Notre Dame has probably one of the strongest networks I've ever seen. Anytime you move that city, people that use their Notre Dame connection, it's amazing how many doors open in companies. We could be even stronger at that, but that's a great starting point where you can begin.
no, absolutely. You know, and speaking about experience too, with a lot of our attendees, they may, right, be in school or choosing to be involved in certain things, you know, and they may not have all of that network yet to start. I mean, they do, but, you know, sometimes you don't realize that you have it yet. So, you know, if I don't have a lot of the job experience, maybe if I'm playing sports or doing something year round that takes me away from a lot of general networking opportunities, you know, how do I leverage what I do, you know, such as sports into my brand?
Well, what's your role in sports? I mean, if you're a captain of the team or, you know, you could talk about, I learned about collaboration, start to think about skills that you learn from the team, discipline, organization. These are kinds of things you get from sports, right? Failure. How do they deal with a loss? You know, you can start to use all those type of things. I'll use an example. My son went to Texas Tech and he's on the lacrosse team. They lost their coach. Him and another guy stepped up to coach the team for the rest of the year. He put that on his resume and what they did fundraising to help get money for the team and did all these things. All of a sudden, he's starting to build his brand and reputation, right? And starting to do extra activities. So you'd be surprised all the things that you can learn from whether sports or any other activity you're involved in. You are learning what I would say competencies. What are you learning about building relationships? What are you learning about collaboration? How to work with others, how to influence others, right? Or you could think about organizational skills, discipline, and some things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are good points. And, as we start to like interview and, you're starting to network or using like, we'll talk about at the end, flyer connection and connecting with other UD alums, as a student, is it okay to reach out to UD alums through LinkedIn, even if I don't know them?
Yes, 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 yes. I'm still very active with Flyers Enterprises. I still get very connected to them when I was back at UD 7 years ago. And I get to know the presidents. I've got to know this. They've all connected with me in Flyers Enterprises. We built that relationship, but then I can help them if they're saying they're moving to Denver. I can help them and connect them with some people in Denver. And so we want that, to be honest with you. We expect that. Okay. And after every time I've done sessions like this, I'm always shocked on how few connect with me or Sharon. I'd say maybe 20% connect when it should be 100.
No, that's a great point. Absolutely. And how do you suggest keeping up your network on LinkedIn with people that you don't see very often? Are you simply messaging people saying hello every so often? Or how do you keep track of keeping up with your connections?
It depends. I think it depends what you're looking for in your brand and your connections. There is some, LinkedIn's never come out with this, but there is some, when I try to hire somebody, LinkedIn comes in with who's an all-star and who comes up first based on their backgrounds when I do my search. There is rumor out there that the more people that use LinkedIn, like more activity, you personally go in and update yourself like once a week, you come to the top of the list in LinkedIn. They've never said that. My understanding, it actually works that way. So my suggestion is you should probably, as a college student, you don't have to do this, but I would say at least once a month, go in LinkedIn, add something, update your profile, or add some kind of article you read or something like that, some other connections, and make a goal. I'm a big guy about setting goals. Maybe once a month you say, you know what, I want to add 20 new connections or 10 new connections every month. You'd be surprised how big that network gets bigger and bigger. We do have there's an adage we always say, and LinkedIn actually says this, you want 500 connections. Now, I know it's hard to get 500 plus connections when you're in college, but if you start building it now, and let's say you built 100 with teachers, other students, family members, UD alumni, it's amazing with it, what would happen in 3 years after you start working. You might have 500 plus, and that connection really does help you find the next job for yourself.
Mhm. Fortunately, I feel like those at UD, with whatever experiences you have, you can get to 500 quicker than you think. I feel like if you connect,
You're right.
I went on this trip with 50 of my closest friends. Like I think, you do, if you have a couple of professors you've connected with, definitely your peers. And then right when you get out, yeah, that first role you have, and the next thing you know, I think go to a couple events, virtual or not, you'll get there. And I think that's a good goal to have, especially like you said, once a month checking in, because then it keeps your LinkedIn resume, if you will, relevant. And it helps you think about the successes that you're doing. So when you go to talk about your personal brand in interviews, you can reference kind of what you've done, and it kind of creates that story for you. What would you say is the most valuable section on a LinkedIn profile?
Very clear. It's your heading and your summary. It's whether it's LinkedIn or it's your resume, you have 5 seconds to get my attention. 5. Some even say it's 3. The research says it's 3 seconds. I'll give you 5 seconds. But you have to find a way of me to find you. And that starts with your headings. Always have a picture and a good picture. People that don't have their picture are 20 times less likely to be picked. Isn't that amazing on LinkedIn? You need a good heading, but put the heading together that fits what you're looking for, not what your employer says. And I'll give you one of the great examples. I worked with someone and she worked for a consulting firm, and her title was delivery person. And she put that in LinkedIn. Now, we all think of UPS, Amazon, or whatever, FedEx. In that firm, delivery person she delivers the actual consulting work. She doesn't go out and hunt for clients or keep client relationships. I said, I would never find you on LinkedIn. Put your titles of what you're looking for, not delivery person. That's more for your application if you have to, at the very final stages, to say this is when you check my job. But think of what you want to market out there. I have like 4 headings in my LinkedIn profile at the very top. I want people to find me for those 4 kinds of areas of interest. And then I will go to your summary. And this goes back to your brand. That summary should show your brand and summarize who you are, that little commercial about who you are. If it all hits right there, now I'll look at your background. But if you don't catch me there and I can't find you, we don't go any further.
Nope, that's a good point. That makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. Now I can kind of go back to, yeah, like the personal brand in general. What is something quick that we can do today to help define our personal brand?
Take out a paper after this session. I'll give you, you could do this in 5 to 10 minutes. Write down your strengths and weaknesses. Write down what you're passionate about. What do you care about? How would others describe you? Just do those 3 things. And guess what? And, obviously many of you have a major. Why are you in that major? Why are you passionate about that major? What are you going to do? You know what I mean? What kind of experiences have you had in the past summers? If you just start to put that in like a 3 or 4 quadrants, all of a sudden you've got some material to work with.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point. Good. I mean, yeah, we can all do that. We have the ability to do that. It's just about kind of prioritizing the time to sit down and do that. That's great advice. So as we're wrapping up our questions, do you have any last minute feedback that you'd like to share? And when you're done, we'll kind of wrap up with a couple reminders and things to share with the students. But, any last tips and things that, of all the things we shared, things that you want to make sure the students kind of take away with them?
We said a couple of these things, but I think it's critical. Again, I want you to learn from what we've learned, our mistakes too, right? Networking is a skill for life. Start now building your network and expanding and focus on it now, because you never know when you're going to need it. It's very likely all of us will get fired at one time in our life. It happens all the time. You want to have your network ready. You never know what's happening. Who could see the COVID crisis, right? We've had a lot of young people since 2010, 11 have been on a streak, right? We've had unemployment keep going down and they can get a job basically anywhere. People weren't working on their brands. They weren't working on a network. Now you got a lot of people that are getting desperate. And to me, that's so the networking for life. And 2 is build the brand now and start it. Like we said, it's not a finished product yet, but start doing that now. And I'm going to tell you, it will help you pick better companies, better jobs, better cultures that fit for you. And then you're going to be happier. I've been in toxic cultures where it wasn't a fit. I tell you what, it was probably the worst parts of my career when it wasn't a good fit. And you're just miserable. And part of that was my fault because I didn't have clarity of what my brand is and where I was happy, what makes me happy. And once I got that clarity, it changed my life.
No, those are great pointers. I've personally kind of had some good reminders and reiterations of things I need to remember. I feel like I've taken a lot of this advice from prior sessions and things in my experience at UD, and this is still one, 10 years out, I'm still learning and having good reminders about these. So thank you for sharing that. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for your time today too. And thank you to all of the student attendees out there that were able to join today. Wanted to share too, reminder about Flyer Connection. So remember, that is the university's networking and mentoring platform that provides you with an opportunity to work on your own personal brand as you set up your profile. So you can reach out to alums with Flyer Connection and ask them to review your profile to share feedback or advice. And remember that if you attend at least 2 webinars today and complete your Flyer Connection profile by October 30th, you are entered into a raffle to win a business suit. So those are easy things you can get done. So I would encourage you to do all of those. And just wanted to say thanks again to all of you for coming. The session is recorded, so hopefully if you know other peers that wanted to see it that weren't able to, encourage them to watch the recording or rewatch it yourself if needed. And go Flyers. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, Krystal.
Yeah.